Hi everyone, happy Thursday. I found this week's reading really interesting and really helpful, especially the suggestions in Reading Revealed. There was one in particular, the Shoebox autobiography, that I wrote down in next year's first week plans already for next school year. This is when they collect objects and they do a show and tell, and they collect them in a shoebox. I thought that you could even use old magazines, use iPads to find pictures of things on the internet. You could bring in old newspapers. And I thought it would be really great, especially for kid watching. You get to see how group dynamics work. You get to see how they interact with each other. You could even make a requirement that they have to put their favorite book on there. And then you start to get to see what kinds of books they like. And it's a non-threatening activity for them. Another one that I thought was great was the cultural x-ray, where on day one, the students identify physical characteristics, or like what we call outside characteristics. And then on the second day, they take an x-ray and they examine their internal characteristics. And right now I teach third grade, and it's heavily impacted by character traits. My students are struggling with that, so I think even after Thanksgiving break, we might have to do something like that, especially with the read aloud book that we are reading. We'll start with ourselves and work with a partner. I think that's great. Carolyn Burke's reading interview, that has to be administered one-on-one, but it does provide some useful information about their books, about their current reading interests, and then the current strategies that they employ. I'll move on to literacy for the 21st century. This chapter, it gave a good overview of the different kinds of literacy instruction and how to manage them, how to organize them. The first one was guided reading groups. Each group lasts about 20 minutes or so, and they rotate through stations. However, those stations should be independently ran. So they are either meeting with a teacher, or they have to be doing something that is independent, that they don't need explicit instruction on. It is a good idea to have any aides or support staff that you have in your room just monitor them. During independent, students read the books that they've read with you, and it helps build their fluency. For their lessons, it usually starts off with a picture walk, and then the teacher helps build their background knowledge, and then the students read that book independently with teacher support. I've seen teachers who, when they're at the U table, they'll tap on a student's book, and that's when that student knows that they should read a little bit louder than when they're whisper reading to themselves. The teacher also uses the tricky words and the sight words and the phonics patterns in there to do a little teaching of that in their mini lesson. Then there are basal reading programs or anthologies. Those are the big textbooks that kind of has everything that you need in there. I shouldn't say everything that you need, but it's like a one-stop shop, you could say, where it's specific to the grade level. It has the text that you're reading, at least for part of the year, maybe not the whole year. It usually comes with a supplementary workbook where the students go through decoding and comprehension strategies and skills. A lot of the time, the vocabulary words and posters and spelling words are built in there. In the primary grades, author studies are more popular. I thought that, oh, I'm sorry, I'm jumping down. Now I'll move on to focus units, where the whole class focuses on a book or an author or a genre, and all students read the same text, and that usually lasts for 3 to 4 weeks. Immediately I thought of in high school when in English class you're learning about Shakespeare, so everyone reads Macbeth, and you do a novel study on that. In the primary grades, author studies are more popular. I think of Eric Carle or Kevin Hankey's, even Eric Lichtenfeld, I think. He's the author of Pete the Cat and Groovy Joe, or Mo Willems. Literature circles, that's when students are given choice. So they pick the books and then they meet several times throughout it to discuss. And often students have different jobs like the word wizard or the summary reporter, things like that. And that's usually decided by the teachers. And then their suggestion, which I thought was really great, that teachers should teach into literature circle expectations with videos and mini lessons, read alouds, anchor charts, reteaching. When I was teaching in the city of Buffalo, we used book clubs, and the management piece was a big issue for a lot of not only my class, but a lot of the other classes, just because they're off by themselves. So I was wishing that I had taught a lot more into my expectations and what I expect them to do and what I expect them to complete during that time. And then the last model of literacy instruction is workshop model, where students are reading or writing independently while they're being coached by a teacher or a coach. And then reading independently is really big. They always say protect the independent reading time. And then usually the whole lesson or that session is finished by a share. I remember Lucy Calkins saying that no one, in a faculty meeting, no one remembers the beginning and middle of what the faculty meeting is, but they always remember the end, and that's why she has a share at the end of her lesson. So I always try to keep that in mind if I'm doing workshop that year, not to cut the share, that it would be nice to save those extra 5 minutes, but it's what the students are going to remember. She, on page 359, Gail Tompkins gives some suggestions for implementing a workshop. So, for writing. In primary grades, students should be writing 50 to 100 short stories during the year. And then in upper grades, they should be writing 25 to 50. That's because their stories are a lot longer. They start to get into more sentence structure and grammar, things like that. She suggests using a writing folder, and once the students learn the process, they navigate through it themselves. They know how to brainstorm and draft and edit, revise, and then finally publish. And then workshop use conferences, which are one-on-one little bits of time where the teachers, they have to research, they have to compliment their student on what they're doing well. They have to decide what they are going to teach them, and then they actually have to teach them based on what they learn while they are researching. I've seen a number of different ways teachers do that. Sometimes they do it even in small group if they notice that students A, B, and C are struggling with sequencing. So they'll pull them in a small group and conference with them that way to save time. I'll move on to the video. I thought it was really cute, the Star Student of the Day video. In a first grade room, I thought that it was perfect. Students interview the star student, and you could tell that they had all of the expectations and the management down pat. The teacher, she scribes the student's answers in a complete sentence while the student is answering. And I noticed that she was drawing little pictures to give them some visual clues. And then after the interview, she leads them in a shared reading with the whole class. Thought it would be great to use at the beginning of the year to keep academics low stress. It eases them into reading and writing. And again, I really like that she had those little visual clues, kind of gets them starting to use their strategies, like look at the picture, make sure the picture matches the word early on in the school year. Not only does it support literacy instruction, but it also builds and creates community within the room, especially in the beginning of the school year when that's really important. So students begin to know their classmates, they start to make connections. You could see, I think one of the students said that they really like to go to Chuck E. Cheese, and everyone was like, me too. So I thought that was great. And then once they do a shared reading of the Student of the Day article, students then they copy down one sentence that the teacher chose, they copy it down, and then they draw a picture to match the words. The teacher in the interview was saying that she scaffolded it for them. first they just had to write their classmate's name. Then they had to write their classmate's name, a picture, and labels, and then they're working up to a full sentence. And I'm thinking that maybe by the end of the year they could keep building up to 2 sentences, maybe even 3. And then I noticed that she was giving them prompts to remember mechanics of sentence structure. She said, "Oh, don't forget your period at the end of your sentence." And I really thought that this was just a low stress, non threatening way to get students comfortable with literacy at the beginning of the year. It's also an informal assessment for teachers to gauge their entering skill level. And then finally, the expert post from Marcy. She was talking about balanced approach literacy and how, you need to have explicit instruction, small group, and whole group activities. You also need to have independent reading and writing. And then she really honed in that it's not a one size fits all, that you absolutely have to differentiate and you have to do what works best for the students. She also said that everything needs to be connected and it's not just taught in isolation in little chunks, that everything is connected. So if they are learning letter sounds and phonics, they're applying those letter sounds in writing to try to spell CVC words. She said that the 3 goals of all literacy instruction should be to see opportunities for learning. I mean, the students should see opportunities for learning, that students think and take pleasure in their own knowledge, and that students get along with and appreciate others. And that was on page 1 because some of that was quoted. She also states that combining phonics and whole language produces stronger readers, and it improves struggling readers a lot more than just doing phonics or just doing whole language. And then I also think it's important to remember, and she stated this too, that it's literacy is not just reading and writing, it's also critical thinking and listening and speaking too. So although we spend a lot of time on reading and writing, I think it's important to keep those strands of literacy in the back of your mind. I hope everyone has a really great Thanksgiving if we don't see each other, and have a great weekend.